The new year is here, and now seems like as fine a time as any to answer a few more questions from the inbox. James, what have you got? Alright, so, what's with all of the gray-brown, gritty realism in games these days? Ah, yes. Part of the reason for this trend is that, from both a creative perspective and from a tools perspective, grit is easy. If you look at a vibrant game like Valkyria Chronicles or Team Fortress 2, you'll find that they had to write a set of shaders specifically for that game to create that look, whereas games like Army of Two or Alpha Protocol can just use out-of-the-box shaders from the Unreal Engine. But then another part of the reason is that the industry's been pushing to make more mature games. Problem is, we've only hit on an adolescent's idea of what mature looks like. Everything stark and unrelentingly grim. It's silly, but we'll get past it eventually. And I guess there might also be a little bit of a because we can mentality at play too. And now that we can achieve this level of graphical fidelity, we've been stretching our realism muscles and seeing how far we can push it. But I get the feeling that as graphics slowly start to plateau, having the most realistic graphics ever will be slightly less important. I don't know, that's just my prediction. We'll find out eventually. Next. Why are games based on film licenses always so bad? There are several reasons for this. For one, these games are usually scheduled to be released simultaneously with the film or even before. This means, to hit the release date, developers often have less than a year to finish the game. That's a really short time frame when you consider that most quality games take 2 to 5 years to make. Besides that, the developers are rarely given freedom with the licensed property. They pretty much have to stick to the events of the film. It's very difficult to create a quality game under these strict limitations. Okay, so why do all video game movies suck? Comic books had the same problem for a long time. Hollywood just couldn't figure out how to translate comic stories to film. We had to sit through a lot of drivel before they started figuring things out. And look at them now. Some of the most kick-ass films from the last 5 years have been comic book movies. The biggest reason game movies are still sucking is because Hollywood hasn't figured out the formula for converting interactive stories to a non-interactive medium. They seem to focus only on a game's cutscenes, and then try to build 90 minutes of film around that very small, very limited portion of the game's script, completely ignoring all the story that's being told by the world and the characters and the gameplay. That, and they just don't seem to have been trying very hard up to this point. Most of their attempts have just been lazy cash-ins on popular licenses. But don't worry, eventually someone's going to prove that it can be done right. We just gotta wait for that breakthrough. Hang in there. What are your thoughts on games as sport? You know, esports and competitive gaming and whatnot. Good question. Unfortunately, unless peer-to-peer services like VirginGaming.com happen to take off, I don't think you're going to see esports having much of an impact. At least not in the US. Still, that would be kinda cool. What makes Minecraft so awesome? Simplicity. Minecraft is the quintessential example of the simple but deep mechanic. It's got more ways to play the game than the most complicated strategy game or JRPG, but it does it all based on simple core principles. Rather than trying to get you to learn a million things, it asks that you only learn one thing and figure out everything you can possibly do with it. I'm glad to see it doing as well as it has. If nothing else, it proves the value of compelling mechanics over graphics. What the hell happened to Sonic? What would it take to put him back on top? Sonic has just been milked to death. It all started with the move from 2D to 3D gaming. 3D did to Sonic what Sound did to Felix the Cat cartoons. The fundamental Sonic game design, moving ridiculously fast, didn't translate well into 3D. And rather than try and develop a new design that did work in 3D, they just tried to copy what other 3D platformers were doing. When that didn't work, the Sonic franchise was handed over to successively worse teams, and the Hedgehog has been a slow-motion train wreck ever since. A couple things are going to need to happen if Sonic is ever going to recover. First, he needs to disappear for a few years, and give people time to actually miss him. You know, give us enough time that we can actually be surprised and maybe even a little excited when a Sonic reboot is announced. Second, take the Sonic franchise out of the hands of the Sonic team. I think it's pretty well proven by this point that they aren't terribly good at what they do and have no idea what to do with the franchise. Give it to someone else, a group that really cares about translating the essence of old-school Sonic to a modern medium, and isn't afraid to throw out all the clutter and bad ideas that have come since. It's a long shot, but I think there's hope for the Hedgehog yet. Have you guys thought about doing a podcast or a weekly column? The idea has come up, but we don't really have time to do either of them. The videos take pretty much all the time we got. I'm not totally ruling out the possibility, but for the foreseeable future, I think we're just going to keep our focus on the show. Do you mind if I reference one of these videos or show it in class? Hey, so long as it's not being used for profit in some way, go for it. We're happy the videos can be useful. We also appreciate that so many of you took the time to ask permission, too. Very polite of you. When are all those episodes you guys promised coming? Yeah, we got quite a few of those piled up, don't we? Well, they are all coming, some sooner than others. Aside from the fact that we can obviously only talk about one per week, we always try to do our research to be sure we're delivering the right information to you guys. Which isn't to say we don't slip up now and then, but hey, nobody's perfect. And for some of the more difficult topics, we really want to be sure we do the job right. But they are coming. A lot of the stuff you guys talk about are things that consumers can't really do anything to change. How can I help to impact or fix any of these things? Very good question. I know it's kind of frustrating to see all these problems in gaming and feel like you don't have any power to fix it yourself, but there are things you can do. First off, join up with groups like the ECA and the Video Game Voters Network. These groups are trying to be a rallying point to give the gaming community a common voice in politics and the press. It's something we really need because gaming doesn't really have much in the way of lobbyists or representation in Washington. That's part of what makes our hobby such an easy political target. Aside from that, just try to represent the medium well on your own time. Elevate gaming discussion with your friends, make smart game purchasing decisions, behave like a decent human being, both online and off, the basic stuff. I know it doesn't feel like that's going to make much of an impact, but that's the thing. What we can't achieve as individuals, we can achieve as a group. The more of us there are out there doing our small part, the greater a difference we make. Well, that's about it for this week. Thanks for the emails, guys, and for watching us in the first place. Keep the questions coming, and we'll see you next week. We've been playing a lot of games lately, looking for a new release that we could really sink our teeth into. Unfortunately, it feels like everything we tried has been a sequel that hasn't quite lived up to its predecessor. But finally, just as we were on the verge of giving up, James had a gaming moment worth discussing. He invited a friend to dinner. Yep, he invited a friend to dinner in a game. The game was Echo Bazaar. It's a small, free, web-based game that he first started playing when he was investigating how low a budget he could get away with and still have a fantastic gaming experience. More on that next week. The game is simple and brilliantly produced on what can only be a minuscule budget. It also has some of the most interesting storytelling methodology we've seen and some of the best use of mystery. But hey, you don't have to take our word for it. It's free. Go give it a try. Rather than spend the whole episode extolling the game's virtues, we want to talk about what Echo Bazaar says about games in general. So, back to the setup. There we were, blasting, smashing, and otherwise myrtleizing our way through the best, torpid sequels the AAA world had to offer, when, in the midst of all this, James stopped for 2 minutes to play a web game. In those 2 minutes, he won a philosophical debate, seduced an artist, no, not that one, and invited a friend over to dinner. Afterwards, he walked back to the TV, flipped it on, and then stopped. Hand over the controller, he realized that something was wrong. Something was gnawing at him that he couldn't quite shake off. Something sublime and yet simple, and then he had it. I just invited a friend over for dinner. When was the last time you could do that in a video game? When was the last time you saw that built into a game's mechanics? For all the hundreds of dollars worth of green and clear disc cases he had before him, laying where they'd been thrown as he tore through title after title, he couldn't find one, not one, that offered that kind of experience. This was it. This was the unique thing. We've got an episode. Now, why doesn't this kind of engaging experience come up more often in games? The answer is actually pretty simple, because it isn't based around combat. Go have a look at your game library real quick. If you can't see it from where you're sitting, just try to imagine it. I'll give you a moment. You looking at it? Okay. What do you see there? Well, there's probably a handful of simulacra, The Sims, Rock Band, Dance Central, maybe a sports game or two, games that are simulating something. Then there are probably a few complete abstractions, like Bejeweled, Tetris, Katamari games, what have you. And the rest? Combat games. All of them. Shooting, slashing, sneaking, smashing, blasting, punching, kicking, brawling, throwing, shocking, head stomping, super effectiving, conquering, shoryukening, chainsawing, ground pounding, spin dashing, unraveling, I guess. Combat games as far as the eye can see. So why are almost all of the games this industry has ever produced combat-based? Well, because it's easy. Combat provides a very simple way to infuse an experience with conflict and danger. We learned long ago that conflict and danger are both exciting. Danger raises the stakes and gets the adrenaline pumping. Conflict gives us clear goals, an antagonist and a protagonist, something to overcome. But there are lots of other situations in life which are as enjoyable, as engaging, or as thrilling as the visceral rush of combat. Okay, so how does this relate to dinner? Well, at first we thought that James's delight in Echo Bazaar's unchaperoned gustivities lay in the meeting of his real life and his virtual existence in Fallen London. And in part, that's true. I mean, if you want to see an example of a social game where the social actually improves the game, Echo Bazaar is the place to look. But then we realized that there was something more there as well. Throughout our experience with that game, the designers had managed to make non-combat experiences fun. So at last, to answer the question of why James found this moment so arresting, it answered a question he has long been wrestling with. You see, James often hears his fellow designers say that you'd never get a game about talking to be as fun as a game about fighting. But why not? Is there something inherent to how we represent fighting in games that makes it more enjoyable than any way you could possibly ever represent non-combat interactions? I don't think so, and I think we have a simple, elegant example here in Echo Bazaar. In Echo Bazaar, talking and fighting are mechanically identical. They're both done with a skill check against a set of stats. The only difference between fighting off ruffians and charming your way into the parlors of high society is the stat you're checking against. So why can't we use some of the other incredible mechanics we've developed for fighting to represent other skills? I know that idea probably sounds a little silly at first. I'm sure many of you might have already jumped to the idea of using first-person shooting for a romantic encounter, and yeah, that's pretty awkward and silly, but let's see if we can come up with some more appropriate mechanics. Well, alright, first off, let's try starting with turn-based strategy games. The study of rhetoric is full of move and counter-move. Conversation isn't entirely unlike chess when you think about it. So, yeah, I can see playing out a conversation on some sort of board, perhaps even getting new arguments or rhetorical techniques as I level. Or take the large battles in the first Suikoden, but instead of armies, replace the soldiers with voters, and the warring characters as proponents of different sides giving speeches. Imagine playing Antony or Brutus in the Forum, swaying the populace and deciding the fate of Rome after Caesar's death. Is that really any less exciting or engaging than your standard, meaningless combat sequence? Traditional JRPG combat also lends itself to non-combat interactions, as do RPG mechanics in general, I guess, since we already use skill checks to pick locks and convince guards not to shoot us. All we gotta do is find a way to better represent these mechanics visually than a character stepping forward and swinging a speech bubble. Even simple changes to existing systems, like putting time pressure on dialogue choices, or giving NPC characters a persuaded bar that functions like a health bar but it's affected by non-combat choices, and thus by non-combat stats. Those sort of changes would go a long way. And that second option had finally let us get away from having NPC persuasion be the binary, do you have X speech skill? If so, click this option to convince, without having to put a much higher content burden on the developer. Even fighting games give us a perfect analog. Fighting games are like fencing. They're a series of parries and ripostes that require a certain amount of skill to execute. Sounds like an argument to me. Quarter circle forward punch to ad hominem. Okay, we're running out of time now, but you get the idea. Now, as we often close in saying, we don't think every game should do this. I mean, we love our Call of Duties and Fallouts as much as the next guy, but wouldn't it be refreshing to get a game about a part of life that doesn't center around reducing people into giblets and still have it be awesome? Hell yeah, it would. Wouldn't it be equally amazing to have the non-gibletizing parts of our standard fare be as interesting as the rest of the experience? Hell yeah, it would, times two. Because sometimes in the midst of all of that killing, you just want to go to dinner. See you next week. This is going to be rough. This topic has been looming over our heads for a while now. Trying to discuss this issue is like stepping into a minefield, but then we can't really ignore it forever. I get the feeling we probably aren't going to be winning any friends with this one, but, well, let's just get this over with. It's time to talk about piracy. The extent to which piracy hurts game sales may be debatable, but there's no question that piracy has a considerable impact on this industry. It's a hot-button issue for everyone, no matter which side of the debate you fall on, and it's impossible to have this conversation without getting ethics and morality involved. In our opinion, neither of these groups is completely justified or in the right, so we'll just address each side in turn, I guess. First, a word to the industry. Hello, industry. Guys, you're not going to get anywhere by punishing your customers. We all know that current-gen DRM just doesn't work. If you're lucky, your DRM won't be cracked until maybe a week after your release. If you're lucky. In the meantime, you're saddling all of your paying customers with buggy, conflict-ridden software, or limiting what they can do with your games, the ones they purchased, legally, from you. If it helps, think of pirates as your competitors. Free of charge is already a pretty tough offer to compete with, so why give them even more of an advantage by ensuring that they offer better service too? Pirates already have the advantage of being able to provide games 24/7. GameStop closed? Your friendly torrent service isn't. Why allow them to also provide versions of your games that are indisputably better? Versions with all the DRM ripped out. Versions that can be installed on unlimited computers and don't conflict with other software they may already own. In a decade, when we can count on 90% of our customers having a constant internet connection, we'll be able to provide functional, non-intrusive DRM by just doing occasional check-ins with our servers. But until then, the DRM fight is lost. Instead, find ways to reward your customers for legal purchases. This can be as simple as offering rewards for frequent buyers. I mean, come on, even my local coffee shop gives me my 10th purchase free. The point is, don't try to punish your customers because people are pirating your games. Period. Secondly, it's not cool to take features away from your product simply because you don't want to support them anymore. You know what? I agree with the guys who kicked down the door of the PlayStation 3. If you bought a PS3 as a Linux box because Sony told you that other operating systems could be installed on it, and then you find that capability removed by the manufacturer, you have every right to restore the functionality you paid for, regardless of what the EULA says. Oh, and Sony, a word to the wise. Do not tangle with the kind of people who install Linux on their PlayStations. Trust me, you are wasting your time. But at the same time, I also want to appeal to consumers to not get up in arms when a company shuts off the servers for your favorite game. I know you love the game and you paid good money for it. Those are completely valid reasons to be upset. But also try to be understanding, because no studio ever wants to do that. They do it because they have to. James has been there before. When you're in a studio and shutdown day comes, people there are upset. These people poured their heart and soul into that game, spent years of their lives working on it. They hate it being shut down as much as you do, and the last thing they need is to be flamed on the forums or called jerks over it. Running multiplayer games is expensive. Sometimes it's an expense the company can't afford, so try to cut them a little slack. It's already hard enough watching your work die. And I guess that brings us to you guys, the consumer. This is going to be the hard part. It's easy to feel accused whenever these discussions come up. I mean, even when you aren't guilty of piracy yourself, it still feels like someone's pointing a finger at you, but... Well, here it goes. There's exactly one legitimate reason for piracy. When you simply cannot buy the game legally where you are. If you live in Azerbaijan or Mongolia or anywhere else where you really cannot get games, please, pirate away. If a game that James has worked on has never been distributed in your country, he'd like you to know that he's just happy to see more people able to participate in the medium. Knock yourselves out. Or, hey, maybe you're an aficionado of the medium and you want to experience a game made long ago by a company long dead. You can't buy the game anywhere anymore. To you, I say, go nuts. Remembering where games have been will only help us to move them forward. Past that, if you like a game, just pay for it. We can't build these things without money. Honestly, everybody working in the development side of this industry takes a way lower salary than they could be making with the same skills in another field. And big games still cost millions of dollars to make. I wish we could do this simply as a labor of love, but you'd never see games of the quality and scope that we have now without money behind them. Also, we like being able to eat. Now, I'll be the first to admit, and I speak from experience, that it's really hard to make yourself care when piracy is such an easy act to justify to ourselves. After all, I'm only taking a digital copy of the thing. It's not like the game makers are losing an item from their stock, and it's not like me acquiring this copy is going to prevent someone else from playing the game. The list of justifications we use is endless. The game is buggy. The game isn't worth paying for. The game's overpriced. I hate the developer. I hate the CEO. The DRM for this thing is ridiculous. And sure, these may be perfectly valid points against the game, but in the end, if we're still pirating the game to play it, it renders all of those arguments meaningless because the game is apparently still worth playing despite the flaws. This is a mindset we really need to outgrow as members of this community. But what if some company releases a game without offering any kind of demo? Well, here's a high road kind of solution. Instead of pirating the thing, write to the game company and tell them that you didn't buy their game because they didn't put out a demo. Imagine if even a fraction of the people who would normally pirate a game instead flooded the company's inbox with those letters. You bet your ass that company is going to give some more thought to releasing demos in the future. And then there's that other argument for piracy that we often hear in the US. The I'm too poor argument. I don't have the money and I wouldn't have bought this game anyway. This argument doesn't really hold water for me when it comes to video games, because any machine that can run a modern video game is a luxury item to begin with. If you can afford a decent PC or a video game console, you can probably afford a game to play on it. This argument really is just another way to rationalize something akin to theft. But just to be sure we weren't being horrible jerks by saying that, James did an experiment. For the sake of argument, he assumed that you can own a decent gaming machine, but somehow can't afford games for it. The results are in, and you're in luck. There are plenty of legit, free gaming experiences to be had out there. James just spent the last 2 weeks playing games on a $0 budget, only playing games he could get legally for free. He played Echo Bazaar, Vindictus, Dungeon Fighter, a bunch of games off Kongregate, free apps on his iPhone, downloaded demos on his Xbox. He had a great time, and it got him to try a bunch of games he would otherwise never have seen. All I'm saying is, it can be done. And, I mean, really, if you can even budget $60 a month for games, you're ahead of the curve anyway. It's rare that the industry releases more than one truly top-tier game in a single month. And between all of the free titles, extra cash from trade-ins, and reduced prices on titles you didn't buy on launch day, you should be able to easily fill up your free time with amazing interactive experiences. I guess all we're really trying to say here is, don't be a dick. If you like a product, pay for it. People worked hard on these things. If for no other reason, think of it as an investment in future games to come. And we're running long again. Okay, we may come back to this eventually so we can rant about copyright law and such, but I think that's probably enough flame war fuel for one show. Thanks for sticking with us for all that, guys. We'll see you next week.